Voice of college football, talking Arkansas, breaking down the Hogs with our guy Ty Hudson. You can catch him on hogville.net. Ty, it's been a while.
It has been. It's been a minute, Mark. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I apologize for not keeping track of the Hogs, but they slid out of any type of contention and way beyond that. And I try to cover everyone, and so it's kind of difficult to keep up when there are losses mounting. I see the scores and I look at the box scores, but I haven't seen Arkansas football since everything was all good.
Yeah, nobody would blame you right now. I mean, things have just been pretty, underwhelming for Razorback fans. I think some people saw something, in the first few games of the year when they struggled to put away some very mediocre to bad teams. Of course, we didn't know at the time they were bad, like Missouri State. Missouri State's Bobby Petrino, of course, the emotional connection in that game. That's what we were all banking on. Like, oh, that game, they couldn't put them away because it's Bobby freaking Petrino. Well, they weren't that good, and since then, there's not really been a lot of positivity. You lose to a bad A&M team, a lot of a lot of fans sulking right now. A lot of Razorback fans sulking. It's kind of, to some of them, they'll have you believe that, not all of them, some of them will have you believe that Sam Pittman's just Chad Morris, just a little bit better version of Chad Morris. I've actually seen some of that rhetoric on social media, even if it's the minority.
Well,
overreaction,
exactly. 4 or 5 bad games, 4 or 5 bad weeks. I know that's a bulk of a football season, but still. Yeah, what happened to this football season? Okay, let's talk about Liberty first. Let's talk about this Liberty game. The first score that I saw was 21-5, and I went 21-5. Wow. And of course, the Hogs made a comeback. I'm guessing there was I have yet to dive into the box score here, a 2-point conversion try at some point to try to tie that game because it went 21-13. Then they must have scored the touchdown to make it 21-19 and a failed 2-point conversion.
Yeah, what's funny is they still wound up with 428 total yards of offense, which in this day and age is not too bad. That's probably a little bit above average, actually. Or in that neighborhood, right? And you would expect more than the 19 points. And then you start to kind of look at some of the things that went wrong. I mean, I don't know that I can't remember a time when Arkansas tried to go for it on 4th down 6 times. And they're actually pretty successful there. They're 4 of 6. That's a season high. That's a career high for Sam Pittman, as far as I can remember. But one of the most telling things about this game is that Liberty goes 7 of 15 on 3rd down. Arkansas goes 4 of 16. I don't know how many in a row punts they had. I think it had to be like 6 straight drives of punts, and it was bad. I mean, it was just a bad game. Liberty clearly made use of their bye week. Arkansas did manage to throw the ball for 284, which is above their average, but KJ throws a couple picks. One of them not his fault. For the second time this year, tight end Trey Knox kind of drops or mishandles the ball, and he's unable to hang on to it, and it results in an interception. That's twice that's happened this year. But he was still kind of the highlight, if there were any, for the Razorbacks in this game. He had a big game, but they didn't. You can't look at turnovers and penalties as this being the undoing. Don't get me wrong, turning the ball over is never good. I mean, you were -1 in that category. You had 2 turnovers to their 1. But this thing wasn't on penalties either. They had 6 penalties for 36 yards. Liberty had 3 for 27. I thought it was honestly one of the best officiated games I've seen this year. That's saying a lot. Well, maybe not really, because SEC officiating is not that great. But this was a really well officiated game. It wasn't on turnovers. It wasn't on penalties. It was just Arkansas offensively just looked lost, unprepared, outmatched, and got bullied around on the line of scrimmage. I can't explain just what on earth happened on the offensive line. They just weren't prepared, Mark. And Arkansas is just known since Kendall Browse has been here to get off to these really slow starts. This year alone, I think they averaged something like 5 points in the opening quarter. It's one of the worst in the SEC. They always have to rely on big second or third quarters to really take games over or to be competitive. In this game, the case happened to be in the fourth quarter. They had to make a little bit of a run where Arkansas outscored Liberty 14-0. But yeah, a lot of things here. They just head scratching. I really think this was a trap game, if I'm being honest. I do think this was a little, and I'm not trying to make an excuse. You should have still taken care of business. It's Liberty. I don't care that they were ranked in the AP and the coaches. I don't give a damn about that. It's still Liberty. You have more talent. The offensive line graded out as the number 1 offensive line in the country, according to Pro Football Focus. You know, you've got some veterans up front. You've got guys that have played together really well. And you got Luke Jones getting bullied around, Ricky Stromberg struggling to get any kind of push. Hell, nobody up front got much push at all. And these guys lived in Arkansas's backfield. 14 tackles for loss. 14.
Like, that's crazy.
You could see that against Bama or, I don't know, a top 4-esque team in the SEC, not to Liberty. I know someone's going to point out, well, Liberty coming into this game was really good around the line of scrimmage. I know because I talked about that. I mentioned they were one of the best in the country in TFLs, and they were one of the best in the country in quarterback hurries and in sacks. Now they lead in those categories. I would argue then you got to look at who they played. The body of work matters. You know, they barely beat some bad teams this year and went on the road and lost to a pretty good Wake Forest team. But Arkansas just had no business getting dominated. Nobody has done that to them this year. Hell, I don't remember anyone doing that to them last year. I don't know that they ever got into the double digits in TFLs, given up. So it's nuts. It was just crazy. Outcoached, out-schemed, outplayed. The players deserve criticism. The coaching staff deserves criticism. No, this is 50 miles north of Chad Morris. People saying that he would have lost this game 55-0. But I think that they do deserve criticism, and there are questions. And if they do lose out, which I think is not only do I think losing out has a seat at the table, I think they're sitting right next to the Hogs. I mean, they really could lose out. And if that's the case, changes have to be made. I'm not saying Sam Pittman needs to be fired, not at all, but they're going to need to shake things up with the staff.
I look at box scores all over the place and try to get to everyone in the entire country every week. And I don't know that I've seen 14 tackles for loss this season. You see 10 and 11, and that's the high mark. You see very few get to 10. I'd say 10% of the games out there have 10 tackles for loss. 14, I don't believe I've seen that this season. The other thing that jumped out to me that speaks to the same issue would be Rocket Sanders, 17 carries for 60. Take out the 28-yard run. It counts. I get that. But just for a second, take out the 28-yard run. He's going 16 carries for 32, 2 yards per carry.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of that, it speaks to those TFLs. It speaks to the lack of push up front. I do think he didn't look 100% to me. And I'm not trying to make excuses. And everyone has said the same thing about KJ, which I can confirm. Last week, I went to practice on Monday. I don't go on Tuesdays. I go on Mondays. He didn't throw the ball once. He didn't throw the ball. And that's, he was off to the side. Only Hornsby and the rest of the quarterbacks were throwing the ball. He wasn't. And then, I was at practice yesterday and he was throwing, but you could tell he was tender and he was sore. Okay, fine. I get that. KJ wasn't himself. I still have questions about the fourth quarter push and how all of a sudden he looked great. I kind of wonder if this wasn't KJ being hurt on top of just horrific scheming. But Rocket, I thought too, he didn't look to have the same kind of burst. Even when he had a gap or a lane, if it opened up for a second in weeks past, he just blazes through it and he runs people over, or people try to shoulder tackle him. Good luck. People try to bring him down the line of scrimmage. He's falling forward for 5 or 6 yards. They couldn't do that. And he couldn't do that. And so I kind of wonder if maybe he's also dealing with some stuff because then AJ Green and Otis Kirk, who was sitting next to me in the media box, he leaned over to me and he goes, AJ Green looks twice as good as Rocket right now. Because he had his first 2 carries went for double digits. I mean, he made it look easy. Now, we can also go back and speak to why the hell didn't he get the ball more? Why was AJ Green, who clearly looked to be the guy and was taking the lane and taking off with it and was having success. Why didn't he get more carries? And that's another thing that needs to be answered. But yeah, I didn't think Rocket looked he didn't look himself. I do think they've got bumps and bruises, but everybody does. Everybody does. That's not a valid excuse right now. It's put up or shut up time. And again, this staff, I know they're feeling it. I mean, you could see it on Pittman's face on Monday when he was talking with the media. I mean, they're feeling it. I know they are. And it's hard, but you know what? It's why you get paid the millions of dollars that you do. I mean, this comes along with the job. They got to answer some questions and hopefully they get some of this stuff fixed because LSU's coming to town. And yeah, that could get interesting quickly.
Well, let's get to that here in a second. We got Ty Hudson on the line, hogville.net, and also Tuss Talk with Ty. Join him right here on YouTube for the best in Arkansas football coverage. Please subscribe right here at the Voice of College Football as well. And again, get on over to hogville.net right here on YouTube. Subscribe over there as well to talk some Arkansas football. Because I made the comment to you before we started to record, this team was a good team, at least in my eyes. I watched the Cincinnati game. I watched most of the South Carolina game. And this was a team at that point that took apart two teams that were and still are decent football teams. Not going to try to sell them as playoff contenders by any stretch, but they're top 30, 35 teams in the nation. Then let's get by Missouri State. The Texas A&M game was a game that they outplayed the Aggies, had their issues, the goal line scoop and score, the clank off the goal post, and then it just continued to die from there, despite a nice comeback against Alabama that brought you within 28-23 in the fourth. And then Malik Hornsby's got to play against Mississippi State. When KJ's out, forget it. He comes back against BYU. They score 1 million points. I thought maybe they got things back on track. But, you know, we were kind of going back and forth between, was this team never really that good to begin with, or have the injuries and regression taken place? And this is a different team than it was on September 3rd.
I think it's a bit of both. I'm starting to wonder if I don't know. I can't say they've lost confidence. I mean, they scored, you know, an average of 45 points the last 2 weeks before Liberty. You know, they went on the road against BYU, and I get it. BYU is not a good football team. Their defense is horrible. It's really bad. I mean, Liberty ran the ball for a ton of yards. D.D. Williams, who, by the way, got knocked out of this game against Arkansas in I think it was the second quarter. I mean, he had over 200 yards against those guys, right? BYU, not a very good defensive football team, and Arkansas manhandled them pretty easily, 52-35. They go on the road against Auburn. Yeah, Auburn's not a very good football team, but still, I mean,
they struggle. You're making a good point because, yes, these are not good football teams, BYU and Auburn. They've got names, but they're not good football teams in 2022. But hardly anybody else is scoring 52 and 41 against those teams.
Yeah. I mean, the offense certainly seemed like it was doing okay, right? Like the offense, I mean, they're still, I mean, the total offense is still 13th in the country, you know, and that's with 9 games played. I mean, you know, that's everyone around them is at 9 games played so far outside of James Madison, who's ranked all the way down at 31st in the country. It's a confusing offense. It's confusing because it's like they can do they do some of the right things, like third down conversion rate is the highest it's been under Kendall Briles up until this game. They were top 15 in that category coming into this game. And last year, I don't think they even sniffed the top 30, right? They're doing better there, but they've regressed in some areas. And the two really important, you know, offensive stats that people need to pay attention to, it's red zone scoring. Arkansas ranks, God, I don't know, in the 90s in that category, and scoring offense. They're not scoring because they're not getting it done in the red zone. They did go 7 for 7 against Auburn. And that's great in their red zone. That's wonderful. Again, Auburn not a good football team, but 7 for 7 in anybody's red zone is fantastic. You know, some really great offenses would struggle to do 7 for 7 and no matter the opponent. Arkansas was able to do that and make it look pretty easy. I think Kendall Briles, for the most part this year, has been I'm not going to say like great, but I think he's been pretty solid. I think he's been pretty good. Now, it's hard to defend him after this game. I mean, I just don't know. This has to fall on his shoulders to a degree. Sam Pittman said something really interesting about the Liberty game, about the quarterback situation. He said, well, I wasn't sure if I'm not going to say what it was verbatim, but it was something like he wasn't sure that KJ was the guy because of his health and that maybe we should go with Malik. Now, I don't know if he was saying that he took Kendall's suggestion that Malik Hornsby needs to, or that KJ's good to go, or that he just straight up vetoed Sam Pittman and said, no, we're just going with KJ. I still don't know how that played out, but KJ shouldn't have played. I mean, I don't think he should have played. I think Malik Hornsby should have played for a multitude of reasons, but and I'm not so sure. No, he doesn't give you a better chance to beat these guys and blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. I get that. But at the same time, if KJ really is this banged up, they've kept him in some odd fourth quarter situations. They've kept him in when Arkansas's got the game in hand, and they still have him come out onto the field for a final drive to eat up the clock. Why? I mean, all you're going to do is hand the ball off to the guys behind you and let them eat up the clock, or at least you should be doing that. But there's been a line of questioning about the handling of this team this year, the evaluations. We can go back to the punting situation about Reed Bauer and Fletcher. They kept trotting Fletcher out onto the field, but this guy's averaging like 29 yards a punt when Reed Bauer comes out onto the field and he punts 45, 50 yards, and then they still start Fletcher, right? The situation with Quincy McAdoo. You and I talked about Quincy McAdoo during the offseason about his recruitment. This is a guy that was offered by several schools to come in and play corner. They move him from wide receiver to corner. Well, I guess he asked to do so, and he had a standout game, Mark, against Liberty. He's the player of the game. As a freshman, he has an interception and he has a block punt that for a safety. Why wasn't he? Where was the evaluation on him? If you knew during fall camp, like, okay, we've got a situation with our secondary. They knew, or else why are they getting paid this kind of money? Why wasn't he over there to begin with? It's possible he's a gamer. It's possible behind the scenes they did try him out back there and he didn't work out. I don't know, but then why move him back there to begin with when they did during the middle of the season? So many questions, so many just what on earth is going on. Again, I think that's where the Chad Morris comparisons come in, like the misevaluations and guys getting moved around and pushing a punter out on the field who had no business ever punting the ball to begin with, and Fletcher and starting him over Reed Bauer. And then you go back to the Mississippi State game where they go with Cade Fortin over Malik Hornsby, and then they switch to Malik Hornsby, and Hornsby, I mean, he's the reason why you score any points at all.
Yeah.
A lot of questions. And that's where those comparisons come in. And I think those are valid. I'm not saying I agree with them, but I think they're valid criticisms of this staff. Don't know what I can't speak to what was happening at the beginning of the year versus now. Like, what is it? Injuries that piled up? Well, they're the healthiest they've been, other than not having Catalon and Bishop. But still, even when those guys were out on the field, receivers were running wide open down the field. I mean, even with Catalon and Bishop and Slusher and all those guys. So we knew right then there's something going on. Otis Kirk, Dudley Dawson, and I, these veteran Razorback media guys, were all saying the same thing. I'm listening to what they're saying. Boy, there's something going on with the secondary. And then what happens? They're the worst secondary in the SEC between them and Tennessee. So I don't know. I kind of think they've been not great all along, but they've gotten worse, at least in certain areas. Now, again, the BYU game and Auburn game, great wins for them for this year. It puts them in a position where they can go out and get that sixth win, hopefully. I just don't know. I don't know if they do that, Mark, if I'm being honest.